I've been talking about various important aspects of my 35-year journey in doing domestic violence work, and I guess what's important to look at now is about what still needs to be done, because it's no doubt that one of my regrets about retiring was I had not achieved that goal that I was so passionate about for so long, which was to stop the violence. However, I can take some heart in the fact that I contributed so much towards, what we know now, where we're up to now, but also being such an advocate for the men's work and being very, I guess, instrumental in bringing my community along to the point where everybody now refers to the men's program because they know that it's positive and that it's a vital part of the community that I lived and worked in. So what's left to be done? Well, we still have to do that work of stopping the violence. We still have to fill some of the gaps that are there. We still have to have the debates around, is a civil legislation what we need? We still need to be debating amongst ourselves and others about, is a criminal legislation needed? Or is the civil legislation doing what we had hoped it would do and provide safety? Or does it raise other issues? And we need to, or do we need to be saying, is there something in between? And I guess there was a time when I was, at the time when Not Now, Not Ever submissions and consultations were going on, I was putting forward another model, an in-between model, where the perpetrator could be held to account and sanctioned in official ways for his use of violence, but didn't mean he got a jail sentence, for example. And of course that's problematic for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with the black deaths in custody still occurring and with the high incarceration rate of Aboriginal people. So I think there's still lots of debates that can happen around what's our best responses and what else can we do. We don't have to, do we have to only have this or this? It's my view we could certainly develop something in the middle that would serve everybody and fill with those principles of safety, holding perpetrators, safety for victims, holding perpetrators to account. What else is left to be done? Well, there's still a lot of learning to be done. There's a lot of connections to be made. As I mentioned, I think bringing back community development or a new version of community development, so that as we do this work, we bring the community along and we influence and change the community, because we won't stop the violence until the community has very strong views about calling it out when they see it, not tolerating it. Peer groups now put pressure on each other to be non-violent. All of those sorts of things still need to be done. We need to connect all of the different areas up, like health, education, child safety, police, corrections, probation and parole, and the courts, so that we all work together, not in silos, but work together and have our principles so well accepted and agreed to that we're all working for the same purpose. I would say now everyone would say that they're now working from the same purpose, but a lot of that connection and a lot of the integration still needs to be done. In my own area, for example, in 1996 we started Dovetail, Townsville's integrated approach to domestic violence. And the idea of that was to integrate all of those responses. And that's been a very peripatetic type of activity. Even though Dovetail still exists, it meets 11 months of the year, every month, and brings a lot of people to the table every month. Some of the shifting of the edges of, say, the police, child safety and so on, so that we all meld into one big understanding response hasn't occurred. There's still those silos, I only go this far, I only go this far. And I guess the welfare sector or the domestic violence sector has tried to be the flange in some ways between those, like bring a bit, could we get this from you and bring it here, and could we get that from you and bring it here, and can all work towards our responses for meeting the principles of stopping the violence and holding perpetrators to account, and most importantly, keeping victims safe. So that work still has to be done, and there is so much to be done. And I think some of the work that got done in that period of 84 to 2019 laid a lot of the groundwork for that. And so the opportunities to do that. Like, for example, we do have the police referrals where the police send the information about the call-outs that they do to people's homes where there's domestic violence and send them to the welfare services, who are then able to follow up and start to provide services. And so the ability to be able to wrap around a lot more and to respond at crisis points and to know what's going on with our individual families. There's been funding and a whole lot of services, so we've been kind of setting up those opportunities that we can use, that future workers can use to bring everything together. And so we'd see probably a really quite dramatic shrinking of domestic violence as opportunities to do it are passed, or and that victims can be much more visible about, we're not going to tolerate that. We've got the Me Too movement that, around sexual assault. And so you can see all sorts of signs and portents in our current world that would enable the work to continue. I would have liked, there's quite a few things that are ideas that I had during my time that I would have liked to have seen move forward, and it may be possible for that to happen. For example, one idea that I've always thought would be ideal, especially in the more remote communities and in small community towns and in Aboriginal communities, for example, was that there would be a safe house set aside in that community, but not for the women and the children, for the men. And so the women and children would stay in their own home in the community. Children would continue on with their usual routine of going to school, visiting auntie, going to sport and so on. And he would be mandatorily moved into this safe house where there would be welfare workers, and cultural workers and healing workers, whatever was needed in that community. And there, things like sobering up, coming off drugs, checking your health, getting onto proper medication or whatever's needed, but also your attitude and beliefs are challenged through programs to help that man become a safe person. And the family, the woman and the children, can be part of that treatment, so they're not done in a separate way, so that she could say, now that he's sobered up, the children really want to see him. They could go on a Saturday or after school, they could go down and visit him and sit on the veranda with him and yarn and generally enjoy their time with him while he's in this safe house. And then they can return. And then the mother might start to say, gee, the things that he's saying is amazing, I feel so much safer now. Perhaps he could now spend the weekends at home. And so gradually that reintegration could happen, but it would be done on her terms, not on his terms, and on her terms in consultation with the workers that have worked with him, and the signs that show that he is actually really now aware of the damage that he's been doing, take responsibility for that damage he's been doing, and that he now would be safe to be reintegrated into the family. And the other elements that I think would fit with a model like that is, let me just say, moving women all over the country for safety is costing the community a fortune. And for those women, it's not always the solution. To take women out of their communities where they've got responsibilities and family and so on, put them into a big city where they live in a small community. Now they're in a big city, it's bewildering. They go home. And then we end up with some very negative views about, what's the point of helping her? She just turned around and went home. So we have to be aware of all of those things and be much more careful about that our solutions actually work for everybody. And I think this model that I'm talking about would work for everybody. And the other element around it is that being in that safe house, everybody in the community would know you're there, because it's not a jail, it's a safe house with workers being there, working with you. And that, so I think in some communities shame has got a very big effect on people. We all want to look good and be part of our communities. So there would be some elements of that. I'm not saying that it should be, actively there, but I think it would act as a bit of an incentive for people to start to show that they're really changing. It might act as a way of forcing people to stay there. The people in the community, it would mean that every eye in the community is on you. If you abscond from there, everybody knows. Everyone knows that you're not serious to change, so therefore we need to give this family some extra safety of some kind. So there's the whole idea of being, for me, the principle of working with the men in the men's program is that they were monitored, that the program was accountable and it was transparent. The community who want to stop violence in their community, but also accountability to the perpetrator for and to change. So they're the kinds of creative things that could still be available, and lots of other really good ideas that will come from workers, because workers need to be very creative in their work. There's a lot of people who, are painters and do a whole lot of, woodwork, all kinds of creative work. But let's not take our eyes off the fact that human services work is very creative. It creates new communities. It creates new people. It creates new ways of thinking. It creates new ideas. And so for the students who are going to be studying welfare, considering going into a welfare work, the opportunities for them to be absolutely creative, to be part of making change, to be to learn enormous things about themselves and to have a better life for themselves, not in funding, not in wages, not in being a star or anything like that, but simply being wise and content and getting the feedback that you're making the changes. It's a wonderful chance for students to, I'm hoping that all the students who are interested get the same types of opportunities that I did and make the most of them and do some great work in protecting women and children from violence and stopping and helping perpetrators to stop that violence and changing Australia into a much more equal, non-violent society.